This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
This week, Peloton instructor Robin Arzon was diagnosed with type 1 as an adult when she was already an endurance athlete and marathon runner. After her diagnosis, she was determined to keep those incredible fitness feats coming.
I really have had to treat myself kind of like an experiment, like get curious and just see and trust that even on the days that aren't my best, I'm trying my best and my best is good enough.
Arzon is Peloton's Vice President of Fitness Programming, an ultramarathoner, a best-selling author, a mom, and more. If you're looking for some New Year's fitness inspiration, she's got you covered. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. This time of year, I always seem to have a fitness interview, right? That makes sense. It's the new year. We're making resolutions. We're getting motivated. So, I took a look back in years past. I talked to Chris Rudan from the Titan Games. I talked to Eric Tozer, who did 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days, stuff like that. But you don't have to have these incredible achievements, these incredible goals. You know this, to be fit, to stay healthy. I mean, I'm certainly never doing an ultramarathon. That's not one of my goals, especially as I get older. I want to stay moving. That's really important to me. So while somebody like this week's guest, Robin Arzon, isn't going to motivate me to ever run a marathon, she is going to inspire me to try a little more, to do some different things. And I hope she inspires you in the same way as well, whatever your fitness goals are for 2022. I have a story that I want to share about something that happened recently with me and Benny. It isn't really about New Year's resolutions, so I'm going to keep it till the end of the interview. I'll come back and tell you. He challenged me to do something. It was kind of an empathy exercise about type 1. I failed miserably. That's the spoiler. So we'll get to that in a little bit. This week's interview is one of my shortest ever. I had very limited time with Robin, so I decided to not ask her about her diagnosis story. I skipped a couple of questions that I would usually ask. But in case you're not familiar with her, I wanted you to learn more. So here is a quick explainer that she gave Beyond Type 1 a few years ago, and we're playing this with their permission.
I am a reformed lawyer turned ultramarathoner. I'm head instructor at Peloton Cycle as well as vice president of fitness programming. I'm on the leadership council of Beyond Type 1. I was an endurance athlete well before I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed in February of 2014, so only a few years ago. As an adult, I was in my 30s when I was diagnosed, and it's been an interesting little dance I'm doing with my pancreas these days. I had just returned from a trip to India. I was in India for about 3 to 4 weeks with my mom and my sister. And when I came home back to New York City, I thought I had jet lag or something. Like my body just felt really sluggish. And I had extreme thirst. That was extreme thirst and frequent urination. And that was the number one thing that really was strange because I knew I wasn't dehydrated, and as an athlete I kind of could tell immediately that something was off with my body. I had an awareness of type 1 diabetes, but certainly not on any kind of medical or even practical level, and I definitely didn't know how to live with it. That was actually my very first question after I was diagnosed was, how am I going to run 100-mile races? And that was a question pretty unfamiliar for my endocrinologist. And so then I went on an immediate search for all the technology that would allow me to train uninterrupted. I actually had a half marathon 2 weeks after my diagnosis, and I ran it. And I think I was on a pump definitely within a week, and I had a Dexcom within 14 days.
Robin is now Peloton's Vice President of Fitness Programming. She and her husband had a baby in 2021. And January, just a couple of days from this episode going live, she's publishing a children's book, and you will hear her talk about that. There is a video of this interview over on the Diabetes Connections YouTube channel. If you want to watch, I will link that up in the show notes. Full disclosure, the reason I had limited time for this interview is because Robin is on a media tour courtesy of Gvoke HypoPen. So you will hear a lot about that in this interview. And in agreeing to do this, I also agreed to post information about Gvoke in the show notes, which I have done. If you've listened for a long time, you're probably tired of hearing these disclosures. But if you're new, it's very important to me that I'm open and honest about what you hear on the show. And I really thought the trade-off of hearing about Robin's experiences and advice was worth it. Robin, thank you so much for joining me and spending some time with me and my listeners. How are you doing today?
I'm great. So nice to speak with you, Stacey.
I know that you have a little bit that you want to talk about with Gvoke. They are a sponsor of my podcast as well. Let's just dive in and talk about that, because being prepared is just part of the reality when you live with diabetes, right?
100%. I mean, in the landscape of things that are uncontrollable, of living with diabetes and diabetes management, we have to control what we can control. And Gvoke HypoPen is the first auto injector of medicine if we have a severe low blood sugar event. And the looming prospect of that can be scary. And as an ultramarathoner, as someone who lives as an athlete, lives with movement, and I know your listeners are very, very well versed in the diabetes landscape and probably can relate to that to a certain extent. I needed to take agency back, which is why I partnered with Gvoke HypoPen, because recently, for example, when I ran the New York City Marathon, I had the Gvoke HypoPen in my race kit. Thankfully, I didn't need to use it, but it does give me peace of mind out there on the race course, knowing that I have this medicine accessible to me if I have a severe low.
I'm going to knock wood everywhere I can find some, because we haven't had to use Gvoke or any kind of emergency glucagon in the 15 years since my son was diagnosed. Have you ever had to use anything?
Thankfully, no. Thankfully, I have not had to use it. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also grateful that I sought out the right care for myself and I advocated for myself with my doctor. And I recommend folks do the same. And of course, do their own, investigation of safety and risks and allergies and all the things associated with any medical prescription. But we have to advocate for ourselves and figure out what works for our lifestyles.
All right. So you were diagnosed with type 1 as an adult. You were already an incredible athlete. And I think I heard you say somewhere that you ran a half marathon a week or two after your diagnosis.
Yes. So I had a half marathon, I think a week later, and then I had a 50-mile ultra marathon a few weeks after that. So it was a blurry and really daunting time. And I had to figure out quickly this new life, this new thing. I believe superheroes are real. And I know that folks living with diabetes warriors are superheroes. And in my superhero toolkit, it now includes insulin. It includes glucose tabs. It includes the Gvoke HypoPen. And I developed a mantra actually during that time that forward is a pace. There are some days when the next step is the only step that you can focus on, and that's okay. But I figured it out because it was meaningful to me. The first question I asked when my endocrinologist said, you're going to be living with insulin, your pancreas doesn't produce enough or any, I thought, oh, okay. And I said out loud, how am I going to cross the ultramarathon finish line I have in a few weeks?
Yeah.
And we figured it out. And I made mistakes and I figured it out and I educated myself. And I want folks to feel that same empowerment of like, gosh, we're going to figure it out. We're going to be ready. We're going to be warriors and we're going to continue to be epic.
One of the biggest questions I got when I told my Facebook group for the podcast that we were talking was, and again, knowing everybody is different, but just what do you do to avoid lows? Because exercise, let's face it, some people with diabetes do not exercise because they are afraid of low blood sugar. How did you get past that? How do you avoid crazy highs, crazy lows when you're exercising?
It is a lot of trial and error. And just like anything else, it's observing how your body reacts to a certain food. You have to observe how your body reacts to a certain type of movement. For example, lifting weights for me might make my blood sugar go up, whereas of course, cardiovascular aerobic things like the bike, like running, will make it go down. So I really encourage folks to get curious, start small, right? You don't have to go out and run an ultramarathon, but maybe, you start with the 10-minute walk around the block and see what happens. And then you bring, the glucose tabs or the apple juice with you. I always have some type of rescue carbs, right? And this is really where the Gvoke HypoPen can come in as well, because you've got that in a severe, in the situation where we're really putting ourselves in a severe low blood sugar circumstance, we have medicine that is on the spot, that is going to react on the spot. That gives me a lot of peace of mind. So it's that two-pronged approach of daily diabetes management, and then, having this in a circumstance where things get a little bit more severe or a lot more severe.
Yeah. We had quite a few people who said, I take her class. I see her all the time. Have you ever had a low blood sugar during instruction, like when you're doing a class?
Thankfully, yes, I've gone low, but it's all been manageable. drink some juice, keep it moving. I've never had to stop a workout, thank goodness. And that's literally thousands of hours of practice of knowing my body and knowing the exact timing of like, okay, I'm going to drink a quarter of my smoothie 8 minutes before this class. I really have had to treat myself kind of like an experiment, like get curious and just see and trust that even on the days that aren't my best, I'm trying my best and my best is good enough. That is also encouraging. So I encourage folks to give themselves that same grace, but also that same dose of bravery. You know, you mentioned that there are folks of your listeners who are so scared that they're not moving, that they're not working out. And that really saddens me because they're limiting their own potential. And why? You're letting diabetes win when you do that.
I don't know if you're familiar with Don Muchow, who ran or walked from Disneyland to Disney World this year.
I did. I read about this. Incredible.
But he was told when he was diagnosed a long time ago, right? I think it was the late 70s. He was told, do not exercise because it was too dangerous. Like that was a real thing that people were told not all that long ago. And he had to wake up one day and say, no. You know, so I give you sounds silly to say, but I give you so much credit for getting your diagnosis and saying, no, I'm getting right back into it. And I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of people in the public eye like yourself who have treated lows while they're on camera, musicians who sneak a sip of orange juice or race car drivers who kind of have it in their car. Can I ask you, do you keep something sneaky? Is your water bottle? Are there two maybe that people should look for?
One is water and one is juice. I always have some form of juice on me on set. Always, always, always. And yeah, no shame in that. If I need it, I take a sip, keep it moving, thankfully, you know.
Yeah, I think it's lovely to find out those little things because it makes our kids and a lot of adults feel better to know they're not alone. I mean, that's half of this. Did you find a community when you were diagnosed with type 1? Because it can be very isolating.
You know, I was, as I mentioned, I was running ultramarathons at the time. And there is an amazing ultramarathoner, Steve in England, very accomplished. He does hundreds and hundreds of miles at a time. Really epic guy. He was the first person I went to outside of my medical team. And I was like, what the heck? What do I do? And, you know, he kind of talked me down. And, you know, I hope to be able to pay that forward, especially as being part of this Be Ready campaign. I want to be a visible example of the fact that we can continue moving. We can continue being heroic in big and small ways in our very own lives. You know, as a new mom, I read fairy tales to my baby girl every night. And I want to live a fairy tale that is even stronger than things that she's going to read in books. And then pass the baton to her to one day live just as bravely. But it does require us to be prepared. And that is literally why I wanted to partner with the Gvoke HypoPen team, because the reality is the more prepared we are, the more peace of mind we're going to have. You can't control everything. And with any prescription medication, you have to speak to your medical provider to make sure that this is the appropriate avenue for you. But it does provide me peace of mind in the event that a severe blood sugar is looming.
You're coming up on 8 years with type 1. Have you experienced burnout at all yet?
You know, yes. I mean, there are certainly days where it's just like, really more of this tightrope walk. So it's definitely exhausting. And to think like a pancreas requires a lot of mental energy. But I'll tell you something I've discovered more than burnout, that every single day we have the choice to turn why me into try me. And the self-pity is poison. I think that self-pity is poisonous and much more harmful than burnout. For me, I choose to constantly flip the script, constantly turn pain into power. I have no other way. And it's both being someone that lives with type diabetes and also being an athlete and also being a mom and also being an executive and also being an author and also being an entrepreneur. And it's like, let's go.
I know we're going to run out of time. 2 more quick questions if I could. You mentioned your daughter. Things beep with diabetes. How is she doing with that? She's so tiny, but does she know what's up?
Oh my goodness. You know, I mean, we're just learning, and she's very curious about the gadgets and the beeps and the stuff. And I will explain to her, you know, in age appropriate ways of like, this is mommy's medicine and this is what mommy needs to do. And, you know, explain to her what a pancreas is and, you know, things that I definitely didn't learn at her age, but, you know, I want her to know, I want her to be informed too. And I want her, in order for her to be proud of me, she needs to be informed as to what I go through. And I want her to see me dealing with challenges and rising above it. The diabetes community is incredibly supportive. And whether, you know, the Gvoke HypoPen can be used for folks age 2 and up. So that's a wide swath of our community. And GvokeHypoPen.com is a great place for more information. That's where the total story is, including any side effect information and safety language.
And then the last question is just, what are you looking forward to in 2022? You've already accomplished so much. You listed all those things that keep you so busy.
You know what? I'm very excited about the launch of my children's book. It's my first children's book, Strong Mama. It is a love letter to my baby girl. And it really puts the focus on a caregiver's self-care. So let's remember that we have to prioritize our self-care. It's not selfish. Whether you're a parent or not, take the time for yourself. Because yes, that burnout is real. And we have to go inward sometimes in order to give outwardly.
Well, I hope when it comes out, you'll come back on and share that with us.
That would be great. That would be great. Nice to see you today, Stacey.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate your time. Have a great one.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
More information about Robin, a full transcript, and the links to Gvoke and to the video are all at the homepage at diabetes-connections.com. I am going to follow up with her. Hopefully she'll come back on in a couple of weeks to talk about her children's book and answer more of your questions. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that Benny asked me to try something new. So let me just set the table about what's been going on here, especially if you're new to the show. So Benny was diagnosed in 2006, right before he turned 2. He is 17 now. And so he's had diabetes for really just over 15 years. For the last 2 years, I've really tried to slide into doing less and less and less, to the point where in October of 2020, I turned off all of my Dexcom alarms except for urgent low. And after a big trip he took this summer, he went to Israel for a month with a non-diabetes camp. After he did well with that, I said to him, well, what do I do now, right? What do you want from me? How can I help you? Am I here just for customer service, right? When you want me, you contact me, not the other way around. And he said that that's what he really wanted to do. Have I been 100% successful at that? Of course not. Do I nag him here and there to bolus, or if I see something wonky? Of course. Is he doing well? Yeah, he's doing really well. Except, I'll be honest with you, he's not as diligent. He's not as on top of it, and he wouldn't mind me saying this, as he was when I was diligent and on top of him. And as you're listening, if you're laughing, if you're an adult with type 1, or if you're a parent of an older child or a young adult with type 1, you have gone through this. I've gotten a lot of reassurances from my friends in the diabetes community that as long as he's not doing anything dangerous, and he certainly is far from that, he's doing great, that the way I would do it is not going to happen anymore. It's up to him now, which is really, really, really hard. So here's where the challenge came in. About a month ago, I pointed out to him that, he was missing some boluses and he wasn't paying attention to things as well. We had it was a moment where I said, can I talk to you about this? And he agreed. And we had a really good conversation like we do every once in a while. And he said, you know what, Mom, I'd like you to try to remember every time you eat to do something. And I said, yeah, but after 15 years, how can you not know? How can you not do this? Right? I mean, every parent has said that or thought that, right? So he said to me, okay, every time you eat anything, I want you to text me. I said, sure, no problem. I always have my phone with me. That's going to be easy. And, he rolled his eyes and he said, we'll see. So the first day, I text him every time I eat 3 meals, a billion snacks, whatever I'm eating, I text him every time. The next day, I text him. I'm not even really thinking. I text him at dinner. He was at work. He texts back, is this the first time you've eaten today? With assorted emojis. And I went, oh my God. I did not text him for breakfast. I did not text him for lunch. I hadn't even thought about it. I completely forgot about our bet. And I said, okay, not fair. That was just day 2. It wasn't that I forgot to quote bolus while I was eating. I just forgot that we had agreed to do that. He said, okay, I'll give you another couple of days. Well, the next day I remembered breakfast. I forgot lunch. So he wanted me to keep it up for 2 weeks, which was our original agreement. I felt that he had proved his point after a day and a half, really. But I kept it going. And I did better, but I really failed at it. Was that a lesson with universal implications? Probably not. I bet you'd be a lot better at it than I was. I don't know why I couldn't remember. I don't know what I was thinking. But between the two of us, it was a fantastic lesson. And it was such a great way for me to see how, even after all this time, how difficult this is, how tough it is to be perfect. And, as you listen, maybe your lesson is, well, that means that you need to set more reminders and be on him more. I mean, everybody, I guess, would take this a different way. The lesson to me was have a little bit more empathy and have a lot more respect for the way he is doing it well. I mean, we're not talking about a kid who's ignoring his diabetes. And I don't talk about numbers, but we're talking about an A1C that's, maybe a couple of tenths, maybe a half a point higher than it was last time. And we're already seeing numbers that I never thought we'd see when he was in the teenage years. If you had asked me, years ago, thank you, control IQ. And thank you for a kid who is responsible. So that's a long way of telling this story that I really got a lot out of. So as you listen, if you're a parent, talk to your kid Maybe this is something you can do. If you're an adult, nodding your head, saying, yes, Stacey, we could have told you that's what would happen. Thank you for your patience. But I got a year and a half before Benny goes off to college. That's it. He is beginning his second semester of junior year. And I think most of these lessons, frankly, are for me, not for him. So boy, I hope I'm learning. All right, we do have a newscast this week. That is Wednesday live at 4:30 on Facebook and YouTube, and then live on Instagram at 4:45, different times until these services decide to play nicely together and I can do them all at once. But right now, Instagram will not let you. That's why there are different times for that. But we turn it into an audio podcast that you can listen to on Fridays. And then going forward, we're back to our regular schedule with the long format interview shows every Tuesday. I am hoping that we're going to have a lot of technology to talk about this year. We do have some great episodes coming up with the folks at Tandem. We've got an update from Dexcom, as well as some interviews with newly approved products and products from overseas that are going to be submitted for approval in the U.S. this year. So a lot to work on, a lot to come. I'm really excited about 2022, not just for the show, but for what I really hope the community starts seeing when this logjam of COVID approvals or COVID delays at the FDA starts loosening up and working through. So fingers crossed for that. Thank you as always to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. And thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Simms. I'll see you back here in a couple of days. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.